We are following breaking news tonight out of St. Louis County. The mayor of a small North County town now charged with multiple sex crimes. We're talking about Mike Cornell Jr., the mayor of Riverview. He's facing multiple counts, including statutory sodomy and possession of child pornography. First Alert 4's Avery Martinez is live in Clayton for us. He's breaking down the crimes Riverview's mayor is accused of tonight. Avery.
Mayor Cornell is facing 9 charges, Morgan, and many of them serious, many of them sexual, and one of them includes accusations of possessing child pornography. Mayor Cornell is being held in the building right behind me on a $1 million cash-only bond. He was taken into custody today in the city that he represents. He's currently the elected mayor of Riverview, which is less than a mile in size. It's in North County. I have to say that Mayor Cornell's press conference today covered a lot of ground. What I do want to mention is that many of these concerns focused on the alleged abuse, which took place over a long span of time, dating back to 2016, and the investigators believe that some of the victims could be minors. There were at least 2 that were mentioned today at the press conference. Obviously, this is a serious situation, and those investigators are concerned that that there may be other victims out there. They're asking them to come forward.
Our biggest concern is that there may be additional victims during this time frame I listed or even before. This is a call to any potential victims. Your voice matters. If you are a victim or you know someone who is, please, please come forward.
This press conference today was tied to an event that First Alert 4 brought you in recent weeks about Riverview City Hall and police activity there from an outside agency. And First Alert 4 has been conducting an investigation for over a month. Me and my fellow reporters have been looking into Mayor Mike Cornell's background and talking to over 30 individuals and organizations about the situation in Riverview, which included allegations that he was driving around in an unmarked police car, wearing a badge, carrying a gun, and former police chiefs telling us that Mayor Cornell was difficult to work with because he was trying to run that police department. There are many other concerns raised by the locals who live there and the locals who moved away. We have those stories coming up on our website tonight. You can find those on the Riverview Investigation tab on the First Alert 4 website. Coming to you live, we'll continue to follow this story as developments happen, and there will be more stories coming. I'm Avery Martinez, live in Clayton.
A lot to unpack there, Avery. Thank you.